Welcome, everyone, to the first Wednesday of the month. It's February already. I can't believe it. But so grateful to have Alex back with us. So, what do you have for us today?
Yes, Tammy, thanks for having me back. I'm happy to share today. What's been on my mind a lot lately that keeps coming up when I'm meeting with people, I do individual counseling, offer groups for men and sexual recovery, and see couples. And what keeps coming up is just kind of our individual need, our personal responsibility, our need to take care of ourselves, to manage ourselves, to just pay attention to how we are showing up to the relationship. So on both sides of that, if couples are healing from betrayal. So I wanted to talk about that. And of course, I've been talking about the 40 forms of intimacy in the last several webinars. And so I'll touch on 5 of the 40. So the one mainly that I'm hoping to help people understand a little bit better is attunement. We sometimes hear that word attunement and wonder, what does that mean? And I just think of the word tune, like tune in, like you're tuning into someone's station, right? In the radio, we used to have that dial. I think some radios still have that dial, right? We are staying tuned into their frequency, their station, and we're not tuning out. So I'll talk about attunement and hopefully just break that down a little bit more so it seems practical. So that's one of the 40 forms of intimacy, and it's going to touch on a few of the other ones. They're kind of woven in there. So first is, like, again, personal health. How are you taking care of yourself emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually? I'll briefly talk about that and then get into attunement. And attunement involves communication, which is another of the 40 forms, and then needs and sensitivities. So health, attunement, communication, needs, and sensitivities. So I'm going to touch on those and again, hopefully give you a greater understanding of what it means to attune to somebody. And I believe these 5, and especially together, they help build safety. And when we feel safe with each other, we can share what's on our heart, what we need, what we feel. And in some of the struggles that couples have sometimes is that there are walls up, certainly need to be some protective layers. So whenever we create safety, we were starting to bring that wall down. We're starting to help invite our partner in to be in a closer relationship. We might have times where we feel a sense of depth, a sense of closeness, and I think that's intimacy. So when we feel safety for a while, we feel trust. So I think, again, safety is on the pathway toward trust. And of course, a lot of that, and I wrote that in my most recent book, the Emotional Safety book, is it starts with honesty. If we won't feel safe until someone's honest with us, we're not going to trust until we feel safe. So starting with honesty, safety has to be throughout our interactions in order for us to trust anybody. So our romantic partner or spouse, it could be a friend, it could be someone we're trying to build a relationship with, but we need to feel some sense of safety. And that, again, means we're not judged. We're not feeling judged by them. We're feeling accepted. We're not feeling criticized in that moment or in that relationship, blamed, all those things that really start to break down our sense of emotional safety. So we'll start with that. So we are an individual before we are a couple. So I think we're the only person that can be fully responsible for our choices. And we're the only one that truly knows what we're feeling. And so we have to first stay aware of that. What are we feeling and what are we needing just as an individual? So when we are aware of how we contribute to the connection, the sense of connection in the relationship, and connection, sometimes another word is just closeness. It is intimacy, but it's connection. So we each contribute to the sense of connection in our relationship and disconnection. So when we feel disconnected, and that's just every relationship. But if someone has been betrayed, of course, we need to make sure that everyone knows the person who acted out, who stepped out of the commitment, made choices, sometimes a series of decisions, they're 100% responsible for those choices, right? The betrayed partner didn't contribute to those choices. And that's where we have to make sure that a betrayed partner is not feeling any hint of blame for that, right? And that, sadly can be, well, we weren't having sex or you weren't giving me ABC, so I went to go get it. I mean, that's probably the classic example. But there are so many ways that, someone who is actively avoiding personal responsibility is shifting the blame to somebody and really, trying to make them responsible for their choices. So can we both contribute to the positive, the negative, and we all have to be responsible for our own choices. So on an individual level too, I think taking ownership for what we do and what we say can have a powerful impact on our sense of safety and intimacy. So if I don't have to convince somebody that they're doing something that hurts me and they're taking ownership for it, I know this has hurt you. I know when I walk out of the room or I raise my voice, I know that hurts you and I'm sorry. I'm working on that. I'm taking ownership. Now, whoever's hurt in the relationship because of that behavior, the partner, they don't have to try to convince or remind the person, hey, don't do that. That hurts me. So taking ownership is on the way to building safety and intimacy. I think taking ownership might be probably the most attractive quality in another person. If you're thinking about, if someone's dating and looking at a site, they look at, are they physically attractive? What are their interests? And, there should be things like this, right? Taking ownership. How well do you take ownership or personal responsibility for your actions? Do you own up to your mistakes? So when someone's eyes are already open to that, that starts to help us see, okay, they're not going to hopefully blame us for everything they do. And there's humility wrapped up in there, right? And humility, I believe, is really on the pathway to being a good partner. If we want to be a good partner on either end of the relationship, when we have humility, and that means we don't have all the answers, that means that I'm teachable. I'm going to talk about that a little bit, about how we need to constantly be learning about our partner and that's staying attuned. But when someone's taking ownership, that just calms the interaction. It helps us feel safe, I believe, because okay, they're taking responsibility. I don't have to tell them and convince them. And nobody likes that either. We don't want people to tell us, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that. So if both partners are doing that, I think, we're in a much better place. So briefly on health, health intimacy, that's one of the 40 is just being healthy. So when we're healthy as individuals, we can obviously show up better in our relationship. So we are taking care of our spiritual health. Maybe that's however we experience that. It could be praying, it could be meditating, it could be going to church, it could be experiencing God through nature or different situations. But whenever we're healthy spiritually, we're making, it's not all about us, right? It's helping us see the bigger thing, of course, the higher power. It's something bigger than ourselves. So that helps us stay humble, but helps us stay healthy. So physical health, that's one of the most obvious ones when we're physically healthy. So that could be a routine of going for a walk, doing some kind of exercise movement in some way. And that's actually how I define physical intimacy in the book, 40 Forms, is that it's physical, it's movement, it's doing things together. It's not what we might think is sexual intimacy. It's just being physical, alone or with our partner. So physical health, mental and emotional health, those are the other two critical areas where when we are healthy in those ways as an individual, we're reading books, we're pursuing help and staying aware of what we need to do, what helps us feel healthy and emotionally regulated, emotionally whole, and being able to express our feelings, share our feelings, and just allow ourselves to experience our feelings. A lot of times we don't have permission to do that. People maybe growing up, we couldn't do that. So now knowing as an adult who's seeking to be better in these ways, I can be emotionally healthy. Of course, there's a lot more in that, but and then mentally healthy, right? Just taking care of our mind, taking care of our mood, and just being aware of all of that, how that works together with, and when we're physically healthy and spiritually healthy. I think when we start with those two, that really helps us feel emotionally and mentally healthy. So if you start anywhere, think of how spiritual and physical health can help you. And I believe that that's just a big part of self-care. If you're seeing a therapist, they're probably asking about that every week. You're hearing about that term. It is something we need to stay aware of constantly and have a good routine with that. So, and both partners in the relationship benefit when they are exercising good care for themselves and staying aware of how that helps them. So think about how this staying healthy impacts your partner when you show up differently. You show up with a greater sense of calm and maybe increased patience. You're going to be different as a person when you're caring for yourselves, because it's not, I'm worried so much about my partner, what he or she's doing or not doing, or I'm just taking care of myself. So it doesn't mean that when we're showing up to these interactions that we're forgetting all the pain. If we show up with a sense of calm or patience, it's still there. It needs to be healed after betrayal. So it doesn't mean that we can't share our frustrations or needs, or even need to enforce our boundaries. But when we first focus on ourselves and get healthy, and we can feel a sense of peace, I think that can dramatically change how much we experience each interaction with our partner. So, again, we're the only ones fully responsible for how we feel, how we take care of ourselves, what we think, what we say, what we do, how we act, all of that. But I think other people, by what they say and do, have a direct impact on us. So anybody that we're in close relationship with, we've given them direct access to our heart, right? To our most vulnerable parts. And we're going to have some of those guarded at times, and especially for a while after a betrayal. But we have to be aware of how we are experiencing that. And when they activate our sense of despair or fear, they can trigger all of that, of course, uncertainty and hopelessness, all of that. We have to be aware of what we do. How do we respond to that? Because are we making another person responsible for our feelings? And that's where we have to be very careful, because they can activate those feelings in us, but now it's our responsibility to communicate that, to cope with that, to soothe and regulate those different feelings, those pain points. And part of that is communicating it. So we don't always see those triggers coming, right? We don't always see that. We're in a good spot, and then someone says something or does something, they walk out of the room again, or they raise their voice, or whatever it is, they roll their eyes. And so that happens. And when we communicate that contextually, and we can say, hey, when you just did that, or when you did that earlier today, that really set me back a little bit. I thought we were in this place where we were being respectful in how we were communicating, and you did that old thing you used to do. So we can talk about how someone's specifically triggering us and request change. It's basically, please don't do that again, right? That hurts. And if it's not clear, we need to make that clear. It's kind of setting a boundary. So we can communicate that. And I think it is our responsibility to make sure they know clearly, hey, when you did this, this is what I felt, and this is what I need you to do differently, right? So I don't feel that feeling. And we're always giving each other feedback and information, whether verbally or non-verbally, that can have us feel safe and have us feel connected, or again, have us feel rejected, judged, all of that. So we can train ourselves in how we respond in those moments. So if we slow down and just stay aware of what I'm feeling right now, I'm really feeling angry right now, or what he just said sent me back to where we were a few months ago. And that time I wasn't feeling secure or hopeful at all about our relationship. But we can plan to how we handle those moments well in advance, because when we're just in the moment, it's kind of the difference of, if you've heard responding and reacting, right? Responding is it's thoughtful. I think there's a pause in there, could be minutes, hours, longer, but there's a pause when we respond. It's thoughtful. There's wisdom in that. But when we react, that's more impulsive. It's pain. It's emotional reactivity. So anytime we can put a pause in there and take a break and just take responsibility for what we're feeling and what we need in that moment, that starts to change some things. So we can plan that in advance. I think each time we practice these, put them into action, we get stronger. It becomes more of a habit. So, for example, we could take a deep breath in the moment when we're feeling angry or we're feeling despair, and a plan to do that helps us in that moment. And that sounds so simple. We've all heard that, right? Take a deep breath, take a step back, take a break. But when we do calm ourselves, we are regulating our nervous system. We're calming our biology. We're our insides, our mind, our neurology. We're bringing ourselves back into the present. And so even having just one or two things that we know we need in that moment, like that deep breath or just a break, that can help us manage those moments. And I really believe it is slowing down and slicing minutes into moments. When we feel better, when we walk away from that interaction, about how we handled ourselves, about what we said, and how we stopped ourselves from saying what we shouldn't have said, taking a deep breath, taking 10 seconds, 30 seconds, and then, just saying what you said, something like, that was hard to hear. What you just said to me was hard to hear, is different than reacting and blaming them and say, there you go again. And so when we do that, I think we feel good. If we say something like, it hurts when you say that, when you say, blank, it helps them understand those specific words that you said are hurtful, right? And so we're putting into content. We're not blaming them. You're a horrible person. We're saying, when you do that thing, when you say that thing, that hurts me. So when we say that in a calmer way, again, we feel good, but I think the message comes across more clear to the other person. If we're yelling or criticizing or attacking somebody because we are feeling legitimate pain, they aren't going to receive the message. They're not going to hear that because they're getting activated, and now their frontal lobe, they're shutting down in their executive functioning. They won't be able to take in information logically and apply it because they're really in that moment fighting for their life too. So I think that just with communication, we need to make sure we keep in mind that our words matter. How we say it matters. And so you've heard, we shouldn't say always and never. We actually shouldn't say should either, right? That word usually produces a lot of guilt. But with always and never, those words are so polarizing and most often produce distance. If you think of one extreme to the other, it's going to produce some relational distance as well, some emotional tension. So instead of saying always and never, we could use the word and just train ourselves to use the word at times, or sometimes, or at times you do this. So, we're putting it in context again. When you do this, it hurts in this way. Instead of saying you always do this, we can say it seems like this has been happening a lot more lately. Or this behavior has been common throughout most of our relationship. That still even seems better than, you're never there for me, or you've never done this. Because that now the person hearing that has to fight through the reality of like, whoa, I thought I had done that sometimes, or I thought I was getting better, but now they're hearing the feedback that nope, everything you've been trying has failed. And again, that's just those little bits, those moments is setting both partners up to really feel a sense of hopelessness in that interaction versus like, hey, you've done some good things, and yeah, you got a lot of work to do in these other areas. It's just very different. So, and sometimes we need to take a break if things become too overwhelming or start escalating with each other. I shared that, I think, a last webinar or 2 webinars ago about the 7 steps for taking a break. So that is very helpful when you're both following the same guidelines, because that can be misused sometimes, and we don't come back to things. So that's important to follow those steps. But hopefully, both in your interactions, both partners can reach a point where they stay when things get difficult. And we cannot stay when our nervous system is activated and we're in fight or flight, we're frozen and we can't function. We can't do what our partner needs us to do. So when we can get into that place where we can stay when things get difficult, and stay individually aware what's going on with me. So when we grow excellent self-awareness about what's going on in me, and then being aware of how I'm impacting my partner, that can really change everything. And that requires us to be present. So present with ourselves and just knowing what's going on in me. What am I feeling in my body? What am I feeling emotionally? But it can be so difficult to remain present when some of our deepest, most painful feelings get triggered. It's just hard for all of us. But so we all need to work on staying aware of that. But we just have to keep our eyes on that and stay self-aware and be present in the moment. What's happening? And grow in our understanding of what's going on in our partner, not just us, but also in our partner. What am I doing that's directly affecting them, either positively or negatively? We're reaching new levels of authenticity when we can be present and we are aware of, okay, I can be me. I don't have to be a fake self. And I know what my partner's thinking. I don't need to assume. I'm asking and I'm taking notes. So again, anytime we're handling ourselves well and we're able to be ourselves, we're proud of how we have done that, because we didn't just react and then feel that instant regret of like, oh, there, I was trying to work on that and I was just yelling at him, or I was trying to work on staying present and I ran out of the room again. So we can also feel good in how we handle reactions when we're more assertive instead of aggressive, right? And assertive, we're talking about what we need. We're able to communicate what we feel and what we think, and we weren't aggressive, because we could think of that as a setback. If like when we're aggressive, again, our partner's not able to hear us in the way we want them to. So we might need to remind our partner when an important boundary was crossed, and that's going to trigger us sometimes just in that moment. But when we remind them in a way we can feel good about and walk away feeling more confident, like I said it clearly, I stopped myself. I was going to raise my voice, but I didn't. And I feel good about that. And I really hope my partner heard me that time. So, and I think we always have to keep in mind this power imbalance. If there's been addiction, if there's been mistreatment for years, and we're dealing with betrayal, and it feels like there's this power imbalance, even as a betrayed partner, we don't want to walk away feeling better than them. Like, great, I told him, how horrible he is because he did this to me again. And I don't know if we really feel good as a betrayed partner after that. It might feel good for a little bit, but feeling like we just put them down or lorded our power over them, that doesn't usually work well for the long term. So I always think if there's a winner, there has to be a winner. There's going to be a loser. And that doesn't help either partner or the relationship, because it's that power. And so just keeping an eye on the balance of power is very important. And I understand, of course, when a partner has been betrayed and they're dealing with all of the trauma connected to that, they need safety. So they're most likely trying to find control and safety because their partner wasn't providing it for so long. And they desperately need it now as they're rebuilding, if they're rebuilding the relationship. So if they're not getting it, they're going to find it because they need it. So if we are the person who betrayed our partner, we can just remember, if we're providing safety, my partner might not come desperately looking for that in ways that look like control, that look like, the partner's taking all the power away. So that's where we step up and we can start to learn, oh, my partner needs this. This will help her feel safe. This is going to help them feel grounded. This is going to help them feel like, okay, I'm really changing here because it's consistent. And that builds safety. And I really think that's where the need for what looks like control starts to fade, because it's being provided. Safety is being provided. So we have to really look realistically at how a betrayed partner is feeling and experiencing the reality of their pain. And they're questioning their past, they're questioning the future, and they're struggling in the present. So there's so much going on. These legitimate, painful feelings, they're activated so many times throughout every day of their lives. And I've seen relationships heal, couples make a dramatic shift right before my eyes. And I always pay attention to that. And I ask them about that, and I talk to them, I slow that down, and like, what just happened? How did you do that? What made this moment happen and go so well? And it is often when the person who betrayed shows up in a different way. So that's when they're starting to be attuned. They're present, they're actively listening. They're not defensive, but they're validating the experience of their partner. So it could take some time to get there for many people because they haven't learned how to be present. Maybe decades of patterns of avoiding and running to their addiction has prevented them from showing up in these very specific and necessary ways for their partner to heal. So I think we always have to stay aware too that under most addictive behavior, there's a trauma story. There's trauma behind that too. So this person that's trying to catch up with understanding how to build a safe relationship is dealing with the trauma they may have experienced as a child or throughout their lives, and attempting to stay active in their own recovery. There's a lot going on for them too. So it's no surprise how partners on both sides can struggle so much every day. But again, I believe if we just break that down, we start to look big and think, how long will this take? And people are telling me it's going to take years. And I can break it down to, what is this week like? What is this day like? And slice again those minutes into moments. And how am I showing up to this single interaction, and how I'm managing that moment as an individual, and what I'm saying that's affecting the other person, staying hyper aware of that, what's going on in us, what we need in order to feel safe and help us stay regulated. We need to do that, but our partner can help us stay regulated. And feeling co-regulation is very much something that can build sustainable intimacy, just long-term intimacy where we are close together, we are calm together. It takes a while to get there, but we can create genuine hope when we're doing all of that in every interaction, and we have a good interaction. We need to be aware and talk about it. So it starts with us. We need to be learning constantly about our partner, what they're feeling, what they're needing. And when we're working on showing up with validation for their feelings, again, and eliminating defensiveness, any hint of that, because that perpetuates the pain cycle. We're constantly learning, and we give so much time and put in so much effort to developing our careers or sometimes hobbies and other things. But if we look our relationship as something that we're really focused on, we're taking notes, and I see guys do that in session or group or couples, they're taking notes like, this is important. What she just said, or what I should do or shouldn't do is important. And they're taking notes. Now, some guys maybe can have mental notes, but they're writing it down, and I see them put it into action. They're staying in that mindset of learning new things all the time. That can help, I think, a lot of couples make a lot of changes in a shorter amount of time. So, and think about earning a PhD in your partner. You're focused, you're studying, you're constantly just working toward that, and you're giving it time and focusing and dedicating your energy and your heart to that. So, without a doubt, what helps them feel safe. What helps them feel calm and a sense of peace, and what makes them smile and laugh. Sometimes that hasn't happened for a while. It might not happen for a while. Recovery is serious. So, but sometimes we still need to give ourselves permission to laugh and to smile and have fun, even though we're also working on the hard stuff. So, of course, we have to be careful with the timing and make sure it's appropriate. We're trying to make someone laugh, and it's a serious, painful moment. So I think when we stay attuned, again, really paying attention, we're tuned into their station and we're leaving it there. We're not changing the station when a commercial comes on and we're annoyed, or we're hearing something that we don't want to hear. We train ourselves to stay there, to stay present, even when we don't enjoy what we're hearing or agree with it or understand it. We're going to hear a lot of things we don't agree with, and a lot of things that activate our own pain, our own anger and shame. But to decide, I can't run anymore. If I truly want to make a relationship work, if I want to repair the trauma I caused from betrayal, it's absolutely essential to stay present. We have to keep seeking to understand how our partner experiences life, the good and the bad parts, the painful parts. So I think also, as a partner who has been betrayed, we also need to show up. And it's important for us to develop those practices where we know how to get to a calm place. Now, we have to work on our sense of patience like every other human being on the planet. We have to be aware of what helps us feel that peace, even if it's just a few minutes a day and it's when we're alone. But we also have to listen and tune in as a betrayed partner and seek to understand the painful reality of the person who betrayed us, because they are going through a lot as well. So we might not have so much compassion in the early stages if they're starting to share about their childhood trauma, because that can sound like, hey, you're blaming that on this, what you did. So it's hard to understand that early on. But when we start to really seek to find out how this happened, and therapeutically, with assistance, we're understanding the trauma and how they went down that path and how it led to addiction, how they might have been seeking to soothe some legitimate pain that they've had, not legitimate ways or helpful or healthy ways, but they were seeking to soothe pain. That can really help us understand that when the time is right. It's not going to be probably early in the process, but and as a betrayed partner, we're overwhelmed with pain in the present. But I believe when we can train ourselves to show up in a way that we're sensitive to when we trigger their shame, because if we're criticizing or calling our partner names and that's shrinking them down, we're actually defeating and overpowering the very person that we need to stay present for us, to help us heal. I always think a betrayed partner, they can heal on their own. If they're not going to stay in the relationship, they can do a lot to grow and be strong and heal. But if they're trying to stay in the relationship, they need the partner who hurt them, which is so hard to make sense of. The person that hurt me, I have to trust to have him help me heal. But so it's so hard. But when the betrayed partners can understand how they are triggering shame, how they are, maybe hurting them in a way that is harming themselves, that can help. So when we withhold compliments, sometimes, we see our partner really trying, but we're withholding compliments. Sometimes it's like, I'm not going to tell him he's doing a good job because he'll stop. And sometimes that happens. So we might even need to say that, and I've heard that too recently, when people say, you're doing a great job and you still need to keep working, right? There's that hesitancy sometimes to give that positive reinforcement. But I think sometimes people who are trying to repair betrayal, they need that. It gives them so much fuel and hope, inspires them to keep going. If they know they're at least getting some feedback and they're getting some part of it right, sometimes they're just so desperate to hear that they're doing something correctly. So I think how each partner shows up overall with their pain and their need to understand each other can make all the difference in how couples can build safety in each of these moments. So when we feel safe, again, we let our guard down. That means we're starting to trust. It might still be very low, but it's starting to trust. And that's a big word. We don't completely trust our partner all of a sudden because they're showing up for us well in a few weeks or a few months. But we can say, trust is building. We can say, I feel safe when you do this. I see you're really trying, because you're not walking out of the room anymore when the conversation becomes difficult. You're not avoiding, you're being present. So that the addicted partner can show positive reinforcement for any changes they see as well on their partner, and say, thank you for sharing your pain and your anger with me. And I noticed yesterday you were calmer. You let me share more of what I was feeling, and I felt good doing that. So thank you. I appreciate that. I'd love to be able to share more often. And so anytime we can give that feedback and it's received well, we always have to think of the timing to say some of those things. But we are shrinking this big thing called betrayal trauma. We're shrinking it down. And again, all the work that needs to be done to repair damaged trust and pain and hope and all that, we're doing that, right? Every interaction, one at a time, because we're making it smaller, more manageable. And when we feel overwhelmed, we can't think on a big level, a big scale. It's just affecting every part of us when we are not able to show up in the ways that each person needs. So, and then talk about it, right? Talking about when things go well, and making sure that each person knows specifically, again, positive and negative, that can really help out. So again, hopefully all of this helps you understand a little bit about how to be attuned. this is being present, it's communicating, it's being aware, self-aware, and then also continuing to learn, be a great, A+ student in your partner. And, I think that is going to start to build safety and trust.
I love that analogy to get a PhD in your partner. I have a question for you because, like, I don't, and I got to give that more pondering, but like, I don't separate mental and emotional.
Mm,
So I have to think about, like, because I was like, I always, so when I'm talking about boundaries with partners in particular, it's emotional, physical, financial, which I want to talk to you about that too, and spiritual. So but I was like, with when you're talking about health, I was like, I think the financial health would also be something I would be, incorporate in that. I just haven't split or discerned between, maybe is a better way of saying it, between mental and emotional. And that's probably something about me, that my mental and emotional state is so intertwined. If I don't know if I'm balanced emotionally, then I feel balanced mentally, and vice versa. I don't
mm,
know, but I'm going to give that
yeah.
more pondering. But do you have any thoughts about discerning between those two?
Yeah, I think you're like everybody else in that way. They overlap, right? They're woven together in many ways. So our thoughts, I think of mental sometimes with our mind, our thoughts. So our thoughts are going to impact our feelings, and our feelings are going to impact our thoughts. So that is a cycle that just kind of perpetuates. So if we're aware of our thoughts, our cognitions, and our mind, and we're taking care of our mind. And sometimes if you're a betrayed partner, well, on both sides, there could be gaslighting. On both sides, there could
Mhm.
be blame shifting and questioning ourselves and all of that. So, but when we're aware of our thoughts and um, with our partner, but just in general about ourselves and the situation, and we're taking care of how we think about ourselves and everything else, and we're having good thoughts, right? I think the healthy thoughts, I think that helps us. That's one way. I think intellectually, also reading different things, taking care of our mind, could be strengthening the health mentally. And then emotionally, of course, is being aware, what are we feeling, allowing ourselves to experience it, express it, share it with somebody else, hopefully, and taking that step of vulnerability, with whether it's our recovery groups, our therapists, our friends, our partner. We're taking those risks and putting our feelings out there, but we're staying aware, as I was sharing, what we're feeling, and that's part of, I think, emotional health.
Well, and you talked about feelings get activated, but it's what I do with it. And I use the serenity prayer, and it's my
Mhm.
actions and reactions. And, and you're talking about that. Like, are you able to take a pause and then respond rather than react? And when I when I am able to take that pause, things go much better, and I love how you were sharing um it's how I say it, this is how this is what I noticed that you did,
Mhm.
and this is how I felt about it. And that's different than, the reacting and, coming after somebody of, and I had to learn I really struggled with the always and nevers. I really struggled with that. And I worked on scrubbing that mostly from my language, because it's it's so overwhelming and feels kind of hopeless. It's like it's always going to be this way, or it's never going to, and so I love that you had the perspective of, I noticed that you've been doing this more frequently, or we've struggled with this throughout our relationship, or whatever. That is a different way of looking at it, but it also gives space for some change, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is staying aware of our own thoughts in that way, and then where it takes us, right? Because that can have a direct impact on our feelings, right? It's going to have us feel despair or hopelessness when we kind of go to the all or nothing. And we do that. I mean, we just have to stay aware of the language we use. And even a simple jump, like I said, from always to at times,
Hmm.
can be a word that we train ourselves to use in our own mind as we're thinking about things, but then also as we communicate with a partner.
And I hear partners often use the, I know I should have, and like, you should and shouldn'ts, and that feels like shame inducing. At some point it's like you chose to do that. There's consequences for everything. Some of them are going to be better than others. Some of them have a very positive, outcome or consequence, and others, so I look at it more as I have, this is what I chose to do.
Mhm.
I've got some data about what how that played out for me, and I can choose to do something different, the next time. But I find that the should and shouldn'ts are so black and white, and to me all of this stuff is in between.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what you're talking about, like, so if you guys are brand new to this whole journey, look at this is a vision for where you can move to. These are complex skills, and when you're in early pain, like you probably aren't going to have empathy for your partner on either side, and you need the support in other ways. But please understand that this is a vision of like how we repair. You talked too about addiction, and yeah, the maladaptive coping mechanism.
Mm.
There are a number of people that I've talked about too that I was like, thank goodness you have an addiction. Their growing up was horrific, and that
Mm.
was the only safe thing. So it probably allowed them to become an adult.
Right.
Of course it's massively failing them now, and they need to learn something new. But when you're a kid and you're, like you mentioned trauma, but trauma, abuse, and neglect, abandonment, grief, loss, whatever it is,
Mhm.
whatever those wounds are, if you're just going like, I need to find a safe space, and you find these maladaptive coping mechanisms, it does not create connection with a partner in a real and meaningful way. But you can learn, like you can go, okay, that isn't, is no longer serving me. And it's not an excuse, it is a reason. But I also really love that you were talking about, like when you're having a conversation, like even the controlling, like if it feels, and I hear this from addicts, my partner's trying to control everything and wants it, like from passwords and what I watch on TV or whatever. And I think it's fair to say, I'm curious. It feels like, you're looking to add more controls,
Mhm.
so I'm thinking that you're not feeling safe. Can you tell me more? Rather
Mm.
than you're just making my life horrible because you're controlling me, but that gives the
Right.
relationship a place for communication.
Yeah, that's exactly right. If we could talk about that, but if we know, if help my betrayed partner feel safer in these ways, I bet some of those controls will kind of fade away because
Yeah.
they don't need that anymore. You're doing that, so we always want to stay ahead of that. And I think the guys, and I'm looking at a couple of these Q&A, these questions here. When we as if we are an addict, or if we betrayed our partner, or we are unfaithful, and we are seeking out these resources, and we're learning through podcasts, again, these webinars, through a therapist, through recovery groups, 12-step groups, we're doing the work. And that's the hard thing, is if they're not doing the work, but they can learn and stay ahead of this and hear maybe from other people in groups, like, oh, that worked for this person, I wonder if it's going to work for me. And it's not always across the board, and that's sometimes what's hard, is just to give blanket advice. Sometimes one thing works for a couple really well, and it's not going to work at all, or it's going to trigger another couple, depending on where they are and their stages of recovery. But when someone can learn and grow and start to apply some of these skills that build safety, I think some of the boundaries, instead of being an argument of, yeah, you're trying to control me and you have too many needs and boundaries, it's like, oh, I'm doing this, you're feeling better. And that's where I think sometimes we might have to come back and negotiate some of the boundaries, because the boundaries on day or week one might not need to be as strict or rigid in month 6 or month 12. If things have changed, there might need to be some things which can just be true to where they are in their recovery process.
And that's a big if. And you're right. Lots of questions.
Mhm.
So I'm going to start reading them. Difficulty with my spouse due to his extreme defensiveness. He is in recovery, but has moved very slowly. He is still triggered very often, which offends me terribly. We have to travel together for a month for a commemoration of the passing of my dear younger sister. I'm very, usually very anxious and agitated by his disconnection and lack of empathy for me. Besides just distancing, what are some tools that I can use when we are together?
Yeah, that's so hard. I'm so sorry to hear about your sister, and when these just life in general, but then something like this happens and all these other things hurt so much more. So the extreme defensiveness, um, you can't change him. You can change how you show up. You could change how you request things. And like I said, you can tell him, and when you do this, when I ask you this and you get extremely defensive, I'm pulling away. I'm not able to stay present. I need you to do some things here. So if he's early in recovery, if he's not doing enough for what he needs to do in order to start changing some of those behaviors, I think as a partner, that's where we have to make sure we're doing what we need and we're showing up. And I was talking about earlier, that's where we have to kind of manage our own safety for a time, because he's not doing it right. He's not. So, and then I'd say be aware of, if you said he's still triggered very often and offends you terribly, I be aware of how you guys are sharing those triggers. If you're seeing that, or if he's reporting that to you, it sounds like he needs to have more support or be sharing some of those things and getting the help, so he's not triggered. And then if the reporting of that, we want transparency, but sometimes if he's reporting that to you, you're having a good day or a good hour, and he comes in and starts talking about how he's so triggered, so many things like that, that's going to be painful to hear. So a lot of couples have a set time. Usually if they're triggered or some kind of slip, they share within 24 hours. That seems to work for a lot of couples well. But they have that check-in, the Fanos, if you haven't heard of that yet, FANOS, where they're sitting down and they're having these scheduled conversations where we can prepare ourselves mentally and emotionally. So we're just not caught off guard. But it sounds like if there's more containment there, more support, that might help with how he's communicating some of these triggers. But yeah, and then besides just distancing, what tools can I use when we're together? So I would say, if you can, you don't want to be too vulnerable if it doesn't feel safe, but when you can put things in context and say, when you do this, and you might not want to just say the defensive word every single time, but if it's defensiveness, it's like, I feel when you're saying that you're not acknowledging what you just did, or you're not seeing the power that has, or how much pain that creates for me every time you do that. So if you can think of how to say things differently that aren't too vulnerable yet, and you can share how it's impacting you. And again, that's the vulnerable part. If you're giving someone information, it doesn't feel safe, you're giving sometimes them more fuel or more ways to specifically hurt you. But if you can feel safe enough to say that, when you do this, I feel this, can you please work on that? And it's over time, but if you can say it in a way that him and he can receive it, that can help. Sometimes writing a letter, or just writing it down, a brief letter of just so you can get your words across and your needs. Sometimes that's helpful than a verbal conversation, because sometimes those, again, we're showing up and a lot of feelings are activated. It's hard to articulate what we really feel. And if there is gaslighting on the other end, or blaming, or any of that, again, you might be so busy trying to protect yourself and see through all that you're not able to clearly ask for what you need.
I've used, and we've talked about in other webinars too, but Kristen Snowden mentioned, when the story I'm telling myself is, and that can take it out of you're doing this.
Yeah.
So it changes, it shifts how it's. But so here's what I really hope. I hope that as you're traveling to commemorate your dear sister, I hope that you have other people in that community, in your family and friend community, that you can really lean into and feel the love and support from. Because if he's not able to really show up for you, I hope you have an amazing circle of other people that can be there for you.
Yes. Yeah. The support is important.
Next question. I always communicate that not having custody of the eyes and having my partner move over to talk to triggers who are in service positions at bank stores, etc., has been very hurtful. He is very self-serving, defensive, and not stopped which is very harmful. I feel unsafe, resentful, and angry at him. We've been married 24 years, and I have been speaking about this during this time. Feeling this marriage is unsalvageable. I feel great despair. How do I handle this? Conversations do not seem to be helping. He is just becoming angry and reactive. Send him to our treatment program. That's the kind of stuff that we work on. I'm not being sarcastic or snarky. I mean,
Mhm.
that is, I mean, when someone won't change, having them work on those issues, it's not just stopping the problematic behavior, it's addressing the underlying issues. That's what we do. But I'll turn it over to you, Alex.
Yeah, no, I understand that we could feel stuck if you're not unsafe. You said you feel unsafe, and resentful and angry because you've been trying to communicate this message for 24 years. And so it makes sense that you'd feel that despair. I think, let's see. Yeah, when you can communicate how it impacts you, I'm guessing you've done this, but and really it's coming to what I need to do for me. If I've been telling you this in so many ways, trying to reach you and there's no response, there's no change. Again, sometimes it's kind of getting into that self-protective mode, and that's a lot of what are my needs, how am I being impacted? Because this impacts our physical health, our mental health, our emotional health. When we are constantly in these unsafe places and this behavior is continuing. So sometimes it's just needing to go care for myself, protect myself, and really set these clear boundaries of this is what I need. And I will not be able to do this as long as this behavior is continuing. So you're starting to set, declare and enforce all these very specific boundaries that are related to his behavior, and it's what you're going to do in response to that. If it doesn't change, if you do this, I'm going to need to do this. And I think that helps you. Again, it's not so easy, with marriage and for kids, just to say I'm gonna separate or move out or move in the other room. But sometimes we have to start taking steps toward how we're going to protect ourselves emotionally, so we can really sometimes send the message, this hurts and I can't do this anymore the way it's going, so I'm going to do this if you're not going to do that. So it's really, again, I think valuing yourself when you're starting to take steps that show what you need. You're needing to sometimes meet your own needs for a time.
Well, and he is self-serving, and I
Mhm.
feel bad for you. I feel bad for
Mhm.
all the service people who are trapped. They're at the bank, and he's that creepy guy that's objectifying them, leaning
Mhm.
into their space. So it is self-serving. He wants validation or whatever, about him, and does not care about you or anyone else. It's, the objectifying is, I no longer see you as a human, or I
Mhm.
never did. I see you just as body parts and for my erotic or fantasy or whatever, satisfaction. And that's sad. So yes, that's someone who needs a higher level of help. And, if he hasn't even stopped the behavior, the problematic behavior. So to me, if he says he's in recovery, that would be completely a lie. But yeah, I mean, we have a Sex Addiction 101 starting on Friday. I would highly encourage him to participate in that online work group. You can always email me, Tammy, TAMI at seekingintegrity.com, and I'll share resources with you too. I'm glad you're here. Um, okay,
Yes.
next question. I love this Zoom. Thank you. I wish my husband would follow some of the amazing advice you are giving. When I talk to him about how this action has hurt me, he goes into shame, victim, and depression and stonewalls me for days. And I end up coming out of this conversation as the bad guy. You're not the bad guy. To me, he's absolutely blame shifting. And oh, yeah, and this happens all the time. I'm so sorry. And I didn't mean to start off with this, Alex, but like it happens to the partners, as you know what? And it shuts you down. You aren't able to address your needs because, oh, he's going to go into shame and it isn't going to work. And so I would encourage, sit down and watch this. This will be posted on our website later today. I would encourage, the two of you to watch this and have a conversation about, like, what do you hear with this? But I'm sorry, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, no, that's
Got a little
great.
passion on that one.
No, that's important as we think about, I was talking about with attunement, how you show up to these interactions. Now you could think about your part. How am I saying this? And you could be saying it in the most sensitive, careful, perfect way that most people would say, okay, I hear that. And there could be some blaming, there could be avoiding, there could be a lot of things on his end. But I do see this sometimes with, the partners are going, the betrayers are going into shame, and sometimes it's very legitimate. They're feeling the shame of what they've done, but if they go into, and depression. So, but if they go into like the victim mode and it shifts over to now we're taking care of what he's done and what he's feeling in the moment, then now it's taken the focus off of you and what you need. And, like I said, stonewalls you for days. I mean, and that's horrible, right? And so if you come out of this as the bad guy, that's because of his blaming you. Again, that's where now you're needing to set those boundaries and say, hey, I'm going to share this. And he needs to acknowledge the real feeling of shame and depression as a result of those conversations. But he also needs to work at staying present. And as I was saying, it's hard to do that when any one of us is feeling shame, and to stay present, to look someone in the eyes. But if he's able to take a step and stay present to hear you, even just one need at a time, again, like I was saying a little earlier to someone else, it's writing that down and saying, this is what I need from you. This is how I'm impacted. And this would really help me with this specific thing. That can help. And it's putting ownership back on him of what he does and what he needs to do. That is taking the focus off of you, because you need to be, you acknowledged, your pain needs to be addressed as well. And there needs to be some balance. I talk about this in couples therapy. When people come in, they start to see me, I said, this process is going to be lopsided a little bit for a while. I'm a betrayed partner therapist as well as a sex addiction therapist. And I'll just tell them, like, this is what we're dealing with first. This is phase one. We're going to deal with the betrayal and everything that happened. And then phase two might take months. We're going to then talk about the relationship and how you both, are contributing to different things or need things to change. But he needs to see, like, this is front and center. This isn't going to go away if it's not addressed. So however you can, if it's writing it down and helping him understand, put it in context, that would help. But yeah, these going to a class, listening to webinars, that kind of stuff, hopefully he's interested, and we'll look into some of that, because that could really help. There's a lot of great resources out there.
So we're going to run out of time, and I will capture the questions for next time. But the next one is addict 6 months in. What are the indications or markers one would see, which would say individual recovery should start to include couples therapy? So help them know when is a good time to start, because it isn't always really helpful at the beginning.
Yeah, I don't think there's an answer that fits for everybody, but a lot of times is there consistent sobriety? Some people will say, at least 60, 90 days, but it's really, case specific to that person's attitude. Are they really into the part? But some people involve couples therapy very early in the process. I see some couples, day one, this happened and we're making sense of this. And then I send them after a few sessions to individual counseling, and then we check in maybe every few weeks. And so that can look different depending on how the therapists in your area work. But I would say if he's owning up to his behavior, if he's consistent in meetings and therapy and groups, and he's doing the work, and he's not going to show up to couples therapy and just blame you for it, that could be, some of the indicators that he's ready for that.
Yeah. So, and I'll use this analogy really quick, and I can't remember where I heard it, but couples therapy early on is like rowing a boat with one oar, because the partner is showing up and they're paddling like crazy, and the addict isn't able to yet. They don't even know how to pick up the paddle, and so you're going around in circles. So I think that's a really good indicator of you're the addict. Are you able to show up? Are you able to have emotional bandwidth to be truthful? Then great. That would be a great time to do that. Can we do one more before?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do we show up when boundaries are broken?
Yeah, I think let's see, I'm thinking maybe on the betrayed partner side here.
I'm confident this is a betrayed partner.
Yeah,
So,
okay. Yep. So I think we have to be clear. So a boundary is not really that good unless we enforce it.
mhm.
And it doesn't feel good to be the enforcer, just like it doesn't feel good to be the investigator early on when you're starting to put the pieces together of the betrayal. But when we can enforce that and really hold that person who broke the boundaries to, that's not, that's not okay. This is what's going to happen. It feels like discipline. And I think we want to try to stay out of that parent-child dynamic with this, where you have to do this. And, he's feeling like he has to report to mom. But so when the boundaries are done well in the first place, they're written down, they're clear, or they're stated in front of a therapist, a couples therapist or coach or someone that, they're declaring these, here are the boundaries, and you broke that. There's no doubt. There has to be built in, consequences. It sounds like a parenting thing, but this is what I need to do to protect myself. This is what, things are going to change. So I think how we show up is the question. And I think making sure you're clear of how you're impacted by those broken boundaries, and, what needs to change. Do they need to be extended? Do they be, adjusted? But there needs to be clear acknowledgement. And I would say, I would hope the person who broke those is aware of that and can say, okay, here's what I'm going to do. Doesn't always happen, but here's what I'm going to do to make sure that these don't break again, right? There's a clear plan that I'm not going to cross the boundaries.
So I'm going to skip to the bottom because it says, this is the first time I've heard this webinar. Hearing Alex Avila has been extraordinarily helpful. So I'm grateful to you, Alex. I've taken a photo of all of the questions. We'll start with those at the beginning of the Q&A next month. He will be back. So the first week of March. Kristen Snowden is next week. Eddie Caparucci is week 3. Troy Love is week 4 of the Wednesday series. So grateful for your time. Great to see you. Thank you all for the questions. The recording will be posted on Seeking Integrity later today. As always, reach out to me if I can be of any help. So thanks, everybody.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Bye.